After a deep, dark fog, Seth found himself blinking at two golden circles, lodestoners' globes hanging from metallic tiles. Wool blankets, smelling of sweat and blood, cushioned him from a concrete floor. Finding his wrists unbound, he tried hoisting himself up, only to have the mother of aches split his skull and compel him to the floor. He touched his forehead, feeling the contour of lumps and swells. "How do you feel?" A lady with fiery locks huddled in the opposite corner, the merchantess from the market. "I could complain," Seth said. She cleared her throat. "Did you ever find the cot you were looking for?" Seth grunted. "What are you doing here?" "I was brought here," she said. He scanned the room, taking in the distant hum, the steel paneling, and the outline of a doorframe, almost seamless within the walls. A handle protruded from the door, and beneath it, a keyhole, set within a copper circle. This was a cell within the lodestoner sanctum. She raised herself from the floor and ambled over, her heels clacking on the concrete. They greeted formally, with palms pressed, silk against callus. "I am Havar Agara. Seth Tyler," he said. Sadness touched her olive eyes. "About yesterday." With his hand, he waved the thought away. I know. I don't want to share your cot or blanket," she said. "I'd never do that to my daughter. Or her father. Nor I, Havar." She bit her lip. "It's terrible out there. Parts of Nade are aflame. There's rioting between guilds. A freak, who calls himself the Grandmaster, has cordoned the city walls to prevent evacuation." Seth massaged his eyes. In his darkest imaginings, he had never conceived of things coming to this, and from the sound of it, they could only get worse. The Grandmaster. Our captor. She rubbed her forearms, and for the first time, he noticed the violet bruises that circled her wrists. He staged a coup within the lodestoners. He's going to strong-arm the guilds under his thumb. He'll use the Roofers District for detaining dissidents. He wanted me to tell you that. Thatcher Street is to be razed and its residents. Where is he now? Seth asked. Dominating Nade, I suppose. Though the air tasted lukewarm, shivers ran along her shoulders. I'm to be got with child, he says. Or he'll kill me and bring another. If you refuse still, he'll kill her and bring another. Again and again. Despite the rod of pain lodged in his head, Seth levered himself up. Did he harm you? Not in that way. Havar folded her arms, clutching her shoulders as if fending off a winter chill. I have seen his gender. It is a shriveled root, unformed in the way of men. The brat toys with us on his playground. He massaged the back of his neck, casting a blank gaze over the concrete. But we don't have to follow his rules. Seth crawled to the door. He rattled the handle, and as expected, the door didn't budge. Havar locked her arms tight. I've tried, believe me, I've tried. Peering into the keyhole, he touched its copper cover and tried to work the probabilities. Nothing. The copper acted as a barrier, resisting the flow. Without his staff, without oak, he couldn't surmount it. He looked about the room. I need wood. Everything here is concrete and metal. Her face contorted with disgust. The lodestoners and their metal. Seth leaned his back against the door, his thoughts scouring for a way. He tapped the concrete with his fist, sending a pulse of probability without success. The floor went too deep. Even with his staff, the inanimate bent only so far. For the probabilities worked best on hearts and minds, flesh and blood. She shrugged. Parts of my shoes are wooden. What kind? Poplar, so the cobbler claimed. He studied her shoes, leathered insteps grafted onto dyed wooden soles, pricey affairs that put his fraying, rawhide sandals to shame. Uttering a long sigh, he tapped his chin in a nervous fidget, and shifted his finger to his upper lip. At last, he motioned toward her feet. May I? Her face blanked for a time, until Seth believed she'd refuse, for unless a man cobbled for a living, requesting a lady's shoe seemed unseemly. However, Havar removed her left shoe, and handed it over, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. Spreading his fingers along the sole, he delved the wood's conductivity, feeling the poplar absorb bits of good from the air, flow like sludge, and dissipate back into the room. Inferior, he muttered, but at least, it flowed. Havar planted a hand to her hip. The cobbler charged me 2 days' wages. Had you known we'd end up like this, you might have paid more for oaken clogs. Seth pinched at the sole and let the probabilities flow. It took some minutes, but with his head pounding and sweat dripping down his cheeks, he extracted a poplar splint from the midst of the wood. Havar snatched the shoe from his hands, her mouth falling open as she brushed her fingers along the indentation. "How is it?" he asked. She slipped the shoe onto her left foot, and pursing her lips, paced to and fro. "It'll do." He jiggled the poplar into the keyhole and drew at the probabilities. Once again, it took time for the odds to build, for the wood to mold itself to the lock's pins, but when he had it, he turned the splint. The lock clicked. He twisted the handle, and the door groaned open, letting a humid, coppery stench intrude. "Thank goodness," Havar said. "Yes. Thank goodness."